Hi everyone, I'm Kaya with exercisesforinjuries.com. Welcome to today's video, how to use yoga blocks. So we're going to talk about how to use the props yoga blocks, ways that you can incorporate them into your practice, and some of the benefits of using them. So basically what blocks do is they bring the ground up to you. So let's say you're doing a forward fold, hands aren't reaching the ground. Having a block under your hands just allows you to still ground down through something without having to reach the actual ground. So blocks have 3 levels that you can utilize. So we have the lowest setting, medium, and the highest setting. So using each setting depending on the pose you are doing. So the blocks just help us align in postures, they help us deepen our practice, and there's this belief around yoga props, even with people who've been doing yoga for a long time, that using props of any kind is somehow cheating or means that you're not doing the pose or you can't do the pose, when really all these props are just an incredible tool to be able to meet yourself where you're at, and that changes every day, and come into the pose that is your expression of the pose in that time. So you can progress using blocks. So maybe for a forward fold, you start on a high setting and you slowly come down, and then one day your hands are on the floor. But it keeps us safe, it keeps us in alignment, and it allows us to deepen our practice and get fully into each pose so that we're still grounded, even if our hand or whatever isn't on the floor. Okay, so I'm gonna go through a few poses, some examples of how you can use blocks. Now there's 2 kinds of blocks. So I have a cork one and a foam one. So in general, I prefer the cork ones because they're a lot more firm, and so I find it a lot more grounding to use the cork ones. But for certain postures, which I'll talk about in a bit, I prefer the cork ones, especially if it's under my back, because they aren't going to dig in like a cork one might. Okay, so first thing I want to talk about is a forward fold. So you could use 1 block, you could use 2. I'll show you with 2. So for most yoga poses, just like for most exercises, the goal is to keep our spine in a neutral position, keep that core stability, right spine's long. So I'm hinging at the hips for a forward fold. Now if I want to get my hands down to the floor, I'm going to have to round through my spine to get there. With the blocks, I can keep my spine long, and the blocks will meet me right where I'm at. I can press down into the blocks, ground down through my hands, lean forward a bit, and I can get into this full expression of the pose for me while keeping my spine in a healthy, safe position. And then maybe as I loosen up a bit, I can come down to another level, and then eventually come down to the floor. So that's how you can use it in a forward fold. Another one that I see a lot of people refusing to use blocks and for some reason is triangle. So triangle looks like this. We're reaching and we're coming down, and now some people can get their hand down and really ground down through the floor. Me, like a lot of people, I don't have that kind of flexibility, so a lot of people will just keep the hand floating. Now if you have a lot of core stability and you can keep the spine long and you can keep breathing, then this is perfectly fine to be here. But a lot of us don't have that core strength built up yet. And so what we're really doing is we're just putting our back, our muscles, our spine, our vertebra, all at risk when we're trying to hold ourselves up. So coming down onto a block, again, I can press down into that block, reach up through the fingertips, and now I'm in this like beautiful full expression of the pose where I can open up, I can get expansive, I can reach up through the fingertips, and I'm not collapsing down through the hips or the spine. So triangle is probably the pose that I would encourage you guys to use the block in the most. I think it completely transforms the pose. If you've never tried it, try using a block next time you do triangle. Really reach up through those top fingertips, expansiveness through the chest, and I think you'll notice a big difference. Okay, coming down to the floor, a great time to use especially a softer block, but a cork one absolutely works. You can even put like a blanket over it or something if you want to make it softer, is in a bridge, bringing the block under the sacrum. So that's that flat part of the low back. Now you should feel really stable if it's in the right spot. If you feel like you're about to fall off the block and you can't fully release down, then it's not in the right spot. So for people with low back pain, low back stuff, SI joint. This could be uncomfortable, but for a lot of people, this is really soothing and a nice release for the low back. So I do this whenever I'm having low back pain. And then you can even, which we don't often do, but I like in this pose, it's called constructive rest. So you bring the ankles out and the knees together, and it just allows you to completely release into the pose. So it becomes a very passive pose where you'd want to spend a longer amount of time and really let things settle here. Okay. The other thing you can do in bridge with the block is bring it between the knees or the thighs. And the reason we do that is a lot of people will come up into a bridge and their knees will splay out. And that's no good because now our knees aren't over top of our ankles, and that force is coming down onto the knees and ankles in a not so optimal way. So having a block, squeezing the thighs together and then lifting up kind of forces you to engage the muscles that you should be engaging when you're in this pose and build strength in those areas that you might be lacking right now. So that's a great way to use the block, and you can use it in other poses that you want to keep those knees in line with the ankles, like a squat or something. Okay, another way I love to use the block is for different seated postures. So whether a block or a bolster, anytime I'm sitting, I'm always have my sitting bones, so those your two butt bones, up on something. Anyone with tight hips will know that they need to do this. And the reason it helps is it helps tilt our pelvis forwards so that our shoulders and our hips and our spine all come into alignment, and we're not straining to sit in this position, which happens often when we're sitting. We'll come into the crouched over position. This tilts the pelvis, allows us to open through the chest. So if you're sitting in meditation or at the beginning or end of a yoga class, this can make things so much more comfortable. I also use it often in forward folds, whether it's wide-legged or just a Paschimottanasana with your feet together. And again, it's helping the pelvis tilt so that when I come forward, the movement is coming from the hips, it's not coming from rounding through the spine. And then another way to use it to sit, if you are someone who finds it comfortable to sit with the knees bent, is sitting up with the block behind you. So same thing, it's this two sitting bones sitting on the block. We just have the knees bent and trying to keep, knees and ankles in alignment. You will see people, there are poses where this kind of thing happens, but not optimal for the joint. So keeping things as lined up as possible. Okay, the last one I want to talk about is pigeon. So this is a really deep hip opener, and a lot of us struggle to keep the hips in line. So when we're in pigeon, we want our hips, so we'll come into pigeon. We want our hips to be in line. So the tendency will be usually to sink into that front hip. So that hip comes down and forward and the other one goes back. But we want to keep them in alignment. So that means that front hip has to pull back, and then we're not sinking into either side. Now, that can be really difficult when your hip is high off the ground, like most of us are. So bringing a block under that hip means you can actually ground down through that side as well. And then you don't need to struggle so hard to keep the hips in line. So either staying upright or coming into resting pigeon, you can release a little bit more through the hips and they'll still be in alignment. All right. So that is the last posture I wanted to talk about. I hope that was helpful and that you'll be able to take some of those ideas, incorporating blocks into your stretching, yoga, any kind of practice that you have. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a comment, like the video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and I'll see you all in a future video. Take care.